The wind howled like a wild animal across the Montana mountains. Snow fell so thick that Jake Morrison could barely see his own boots as he walked back from the barn. He'd been living on this ranch for 3 years now, and he'd never seen a storm this bad. Jake pulled his coat tighter and pushed through the snow toward his house. The warm lights from his windows looked like tiny stars in all that white darkness. He was almost at his front door when he saw something that made him stop dead in his tracks. There was a person lying in the snow near his fence. At first, Jake thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Who would be out here in the middle of nowhere during a blizzard? But as he got closer, he could see it was real. A young woman was curled up against his fence post, covered in snow like she'd been there for hours. Jake ran to her and knelt down. She was wearing fancy clothes that were all torn up, a silk dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her lips were blue and her skin was ice cold. She wasn't moving. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jake shook her shoulder gently. Nothing. He checked her pulse. Still alive, but barely. If he didn't get her inside soon, she'd be dead within the hour. Jake picked her up in his arms. She felt light as a bird, like she hadn't eaten a good meal in weeks. Her long dark hair was frozen with ice crystals. As he carried her toward the house, he noticed something else strange. No car tracks in the snow. No footprints except hers. And they came from the direction of the main road. That was over 2 miles away. How had she walked that far in this storm? Inside his warm house, Jake laid her on the couch near the fireplace. He grabbed every blanket he could find and wrapped her up tight. Then he went to the kitchen to make hot coffee and soup. His hands were shaking a little, and not from the cold. Jake had lived alone for so long that having another person in his house felt weird. He'd moved to this ranch because he wanted to be left alone. After 12 years in the military, fighting in places most people couldn't pronounce, Jake was tired of people. Tired of noise. Tired of always watching his back. Out here, the only sounds were wind, cattle, and his own thoughts. But now there was a stranger sleeping on his couch, and Jake didn't know what to think about that. When he came back with the hot coffee, the woman was starting to move. Her eyes fluttered open. They were green like summer grass. She looked around the room with confusion. Then her gaze landed on Jake. Fear flashed across her face, and she tried to sit up too fast. "Easy there," Jake said, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "You're safe. I found you outside in the snow. You were pretty much frozen solid." The woman stared at him for a long moment. She had the kind of face that belonged in magazines. Perfect features, smooth skin. But there was something in her eyes that reminded Jake of wounded animals he'd seen. "Scared and ready to run, where am I?" she asked. Her voice was soft and had an accent he couldn't place. "My ranch. About 50 miles from the nearest town. I'm Jake Morrison." He sat down in the chair across from her, keeping his distance so she wouldn't feel trapped. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for escape routes. I don't remember." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You don't remember your name?" "I don't remember anything. How I got here, where I came from, what happened to me." She touched her head gingerly. "Everything's just blank." Jake studied her face. In his military days, he'd gotten pretty good at reading people. This woman was scared, that much was true. But she was also lying about something. Maybe not about her memory, but definitely about something. "Well, whoever you are, you're lucky to be alive," Jake said. "That storm out there would have killed you in another hour. You want some soup, coffee?" She nodded, still watching him carefully. "Thank you for saving me." As Jake went to get her food, he couldn't stop thinking about how strange this all was. Expensive clothes in the middle of nowhere. No ID, no purse, no phone. And those weren't the clothes someone wore for hiking or camping. That dress was the kind of thing rich women wore to fancy parties. When he brought her the soup, she ate it like she hadn't seen food in days. Her hands shook a little as she held the spoon. "The storm's supposed to last another day or two," Jake said. "You're welcome to stay until it passes. I've got a guest room upstairs." She looked up at him with surprise. "Just like that?" "You don't know anything about me." Jake shrugged. "Don't need to. You're human, you were dying, and I helped. That's what people do." He paused. "At least that's what they should do." Something in her expression changed when he said that, like she'd never heard those words before. "I don't have any money to pay you," she said quietly. "Did I ask for money?" "No, but—" She trailed off, looking confused again. Jake had seen that look before in places where people forgot what kindness looked like. Look, whatever trouble you're running from, it's none of my business. You can stay here until you figure out what you want to do next. The only rule is don't bring danger to my doorstep." She nodded quickly. "I won't, I promise." But even as she said it, Jake noticed how she kept glancing toward the windows, like she expected someone to come looking for her. And the way she held herself, ready to run at the first sign of trouble. Jake had come to this ranch to escape his past. Something told him this woman was trying to do the same thing. The question was, would her past let her go as easily as his had? Outside, the storm continued to rage, trapping them both in this moment. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet life was about to get very complicated. 3 days had passed since Jake found the mysterious woman in the snow. The storm was finally ending, but she showed no signs of wanting to leave. Not that Jake minded much. Having her around wasn't as strange as he'd thought it would be. She still claimed she couldn't remember her name, so Jake had started calling her Elena, after his grandmother who'd been just as stubborn and mysterious. Elena seemed to like the name, or at least she didn't object to it. What surprised Jake most was how quickly Elena had adapted to ranch life. On her second day, she'd insisted on helping with breakfast. Jake had expected burned eggs and smoke alarms, but instead woke up to the smell of perfect pancakes and fresh coffee. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Jake asked, cutting into pancakes that were fluffy as clouds. Elena paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. I'm not sure. My hands just seem to know what to do." Jake watched her carefully. She had that same confused look she got whenever someone asked her about her past, but her hands moved in the kitchen like someone who'd been cooking for years. Professional, efficient movements that came from muscle memory. After breakfast, Elena had volunteered to help with the outdoor chores. Jake had tried to talk her out of it. The work was hard and she was still recovering. But Elena was determined. "I need to do something useful," she'd said. "I don't like sitting around feeling helpless." So Jake had given her simple tasks. Feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, helping him carry supplies. But he noticed things that didn't add up. Elena's hands were soft and unmarked by any kind of manual labor. Her teeth were perfect, the kind of dental work that costs serious money. And despite being out in a blizzard for hours, her nails were perfectly manicured. This wasn't a woman who'd grown up doing farm work, but the strangest thing happened on the third day. Elena was helping Jake fix a broken fence post when she slipped on some ice. She caught herself on the barbed wire and it cut a deep gash across her palm. The moment Elena saw the blood, she went completely white. Not just pale, white as fresh snow. She started shaking and couldn't seem to catch her breath. "Hey, it's okay," Jake said, grabbing a clean cloth to wrap her hand. "It's just a cut." Not even that deep. But Elena was staring at the blood like it was poison. Her whole body was trembling and she looked like she might pass out. I can't, she gasped. Jake wrapped her hand quickly and led her back to the house. He sat her down on the couch and made her drink some water. It took almost an hour for Elena to stop shaking. "Sorry," she whispered finally. "I don't know what happened to me." "You don't like blood?" Jake asked gently. "I guess not." But Elena's expression suggested it was more than just not liking it. She looked like someone who'd seen too much blood in her life. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Elena did something that caught Jake completely off guard. "I want to stay," she said suddenly. Jake looked up from the book he was reading. "Stay for how long?" "Permanently. I want to live here with you." Elena turned to face him and her green eyes were dead serious. "I can earn my keep. I'm a good cook, I can clean, I can learn to do ranch work, and I can take care of your other needs too." It took Jake a moment to understand what she meant. When he did, he nearly choked on his coffee. "Elena, I don't think you know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." She moved closer to him on the couch. "Men have needs. I understand that. I can sleep with you tonight and every night if you let me stay. It's a fair trade." The way she said it made Jake's stomach turn, not because of what she was offering, but because of how she was offering it. Like it was just another chore like feeding chickens or washing dishes. "That's not how this works," Jake said firmly. "I don't want anything like that from you." Elena looked confused. "But I have to pay you somehow. I don't have money, so nothing." Jake set down his coffee and looked her straight in the eyes. "Elena, listen to me carefully. You don't owe me anything. Not money, not cooking, and definitely not your body. I helped you because you needed help. That's it. But men always want something, Elena said quietly. They always expect payment. The way she said those words made Jake's blood run cold. This wasn't just about being grateful. This was about a woman who'd been taught that her body was currency. Not all men, Jake said, and not me. Whatever happened to you before, whoever taught you to think that way, they were wrong. Elena stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. So you don't want me to sleep with you? Not like that. Not as payment for anything. Jake chose his words carefully. Elena, when two people decide to be together, it should be because they care about each other. Because they want to be together. Not because one person owes the other something. I don't understand, Elena whispered. I know you don't. And that tells me more about your past than any story you could remember. They sat in silence for a while, both staring into the fire. Finally, Elena spoke again. In the pieces I do remember, there are always men making deals, trading things, trading people. She wrapped her arms around herself. I think I was one of the things being traded. Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. Well, you're not anymore. You're free to make your own choices now. Free. Elena repeated the word like she was testing how it sounded. I'm not sure I know what that means. It means you get to decide what you want to do with your life, where you want to go, who you want to be with, what kind of person you want to become. Nobody else gets to make those choices for you. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, what if I choose to stay here? Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to. Jake looked at her carefully. Do you want to stay? Really want to? Not because you're scared to leave or because you think you should. Elena considered this. I think so. This is the first place I've ever felt safe. But I need time to figure out who I am when nobody's telling me what to do. Then you can stay as long as you need, Jake said. But we're going to figure out some ground rules. Starting with the fact that you're a guest here, not a servant or anything else. As Elena nodded, Jake noticed something different in her expression. For the first time since he'd found her, she didn't look like a scared animal ready to run. She looked like a woman who was starting to remember what hope felt like. But outside, the wind was picking up again. And Jake couldn't shake the feeling that Elena's past wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The next morning, Jake woke up to find Elena already in the kitchen making breakfast. But something was different. Instead of the expensive torn dress she'd been wearing, she had on some of his old clothes, a flannel shirt that was way too big for her and a pair of jeans held up with a belt. I hope you don't mind, Elena said when she saw him looking. I found these in the guest room closet. My dress was, well, it wasn't exactly ranch wear. Jake nodded. Those belonged to my sister. She left them here last time she visited. The clothes looked better on Elena than they ever had on his sister. More natural somehow. Over breakfast, Jake laid out what he'd been thinking about all night. If you're going to stay here, we need to set some rules, he said. Not because I want to control you, but because we both need to know what to expect. Elena looked nervous. What kind of rules? First, you're not my employee or my servant. You're my guest. That means you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But I want to help, Elena protested. I need to feel useful. That's fine. But helping because you want to is different from helping because you think you have to. Jake poured himself more coffee. Second, you get your own space. The guest room is yours. I won't come in without permission and you can lock the door if you want to. Elena frowned. Why would I lock the door? The question made Jake sad. Because everyone deserves privacy. Because sometimes people need space to think or feel safe. Oh, Elena considered this. I've never had a room that was just mine before. Well, now you do. Jake continued with his list. Third, if you want to leave, say for a day, for a week, forever, you can. No questions asked. And if you want to stay, you can do that too. But it has to be your choice. And what if you want me to leave? Elena asked quietly. Then I'll tell you honestly. But right now I don't. Jake met her eyes. Your past is your business, Elena. I won't push you to remember things you're not ready for. But I also won't pretend I don't notice things. What kind of things? Jake chose his words carefully. You cook like a professional chef, but you've never done manual labor. You're terrified of blood, but you've obviously seen violence before. You expect men to demand payment for basic kindness. Someone taught you these things, and it wasn't someone who cared about you. Elena's face went pale. I told you I don't remember, I know. And maybe that's for the best right now. Jake leaned forward. But Elena not remembering doesn't make it go away. Sooner or later, you're going to have to face whatever you're running from. What if I don't want to? Then that's your choice too. But running forever is exhausting. Trust me, I know. That afternoon, Elena surprised Jake by asking if she could help him with the harder ranch work. Not just feeding chickens, but actually learning to take care of the cattle and maintain the property. Are you sure? Jake asked. It's cold work and some of it's pretty tough. I want to learn. If I'm going to live here, I should know how everything works. So Jake taught her how to check the cattle for illness, how to repair fences, how to operate the equipment. Elena was a quick learner, but Jake noticed she approached everything like she was being tested. Like making a mistake would have serious consequences. Relax, Jake said when Elena got frustrated trying to fix a gate latch. It's just a latch. If you break it, we'll get a new one. But I should be able to do this right, Elena said, her jaw tight with concentration. Says who? Elena paused. I don't know. It just feels important to be perfect. Elena, look at me. Jake waited until she did. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Especially not me. Making mistakes is how people learn. In the fragments I remember, mistakes had consequences, Elena said quietly. What kind of consequences? Elena's hand unconsciously went to her ribs like she was remembering pain. Bad ones. Jake felt that familiar anger building in his chest again. Well, here the only consequence of making a mistake is that we try again. That's it. It took Elena a while to believe him, but gradually she started to relax. By the end of the week, she was laughing when she messed up instead of looking terrified. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Elena started talking about the fragments of memory that did come back to her. I remember big houses, she said, always moving from one to another, and men in expensive suits making deals in quiet voices. What kind of deals? I was never allowed to listen to the details. But I remember being told I was special, that I was being saved for something important. Elena shivered despite the warmth from the fire. I think they were talking about selling me. Jake's hands clenched into fists, but he kept his voice gentle. To who? Someone powerful. Someone who would pay a lot for... Elena trailed off, looking uncomfortable. For what? For someone pure, untouched. The words came out barely above a whisper. They used to bring doctors to examine me, to make sure I was still suitable. Jake had to take several deep breaths before he could speak. Elena, that's not normal. What those people did to you, it was wrong. But I was valuable, Elena said, like she was trying to convince herself. They always told me how valuable I was. You're not an object to be bought and sold. You're a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams. Jake moved closer to her on the couch, but not close enough to make her feel trapped. And your value has nothing to do with what men think they can take from you. Elena looked at him with confusion. Then what makes me valuable? The question broke Jake's heart. Everything. Your kindness, your strength, your intelligence. The way you make coffee in the morning and hum while you cook. The way you're not afraid to learn new things even when they scare you. He paused. You're valuable because you exist, Elena, not because of what you can do for other people. Elena started crying then, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away quickly. Hey, it's okay to cry, Jake said softly. They told me crying was weak, that it made me less attractive. They told you a lot of things that were lies. Jake handed her a tissue. Crying means you're human. It means you feel things. That's not weak. That's brave. As Elena cried, Jake realized something important was happening. She wasn't just remembering her past. She was starting to mourn it. Mourning the childhood she'd never had. The choices that had been taken from her. The person she might have been if she'd grown up free. What happens now? Elena asked when her tears finally stopped. Now you get to decide who you want to be, Jake said. Not who they told you to be, not who you think I want you to be. Who you want to be. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think I want to be someone who chooses her own life. That sounds like a good place to start. But even as Jake said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that Elena's past wasn't going to let her choose so easily. Somewhere out there, people were probably looking for their lost investment. And when they found her, they wouldn't care about the person she was becoming. They would only care about getting back what they thought they owned. Elena's screams woke Jake from a deep sleep. He grabbed the gun from his nightstand and rushed to her room, expecting to find an intruder. Instead, he found Elena thrashing in her bed, trapped in a nightmare. No, please, she was crying out. I'll be good. I'll be perfect. Don't let him take me yet. Jake set down his gun and gently shook her shoulder. Elena, wake up. You're safe. Her eyes snapped open, wild with terror. For a moment she didn't recognize him. Then reality came flooding back and she collapsed against his chest, sobbing. Tell me about the dream, Jake said softly, stroking her hair. I remembered more, Elena whispered. The wedding dress. They made me try on this white dress and everyone was talking about how beautiful I looked. But I wasn't the bride, I was the gift. Jake's jaw tightened. What do you mean? There was this man, Viktor Kozlov. He had business dealings with the family that raised me. They owed him money, lots of it. Elena pulled away to look at Jake. So they offered me instead, a virgin bride for his son. It would settle their debt and create a business alliance. When was this supposed to happen? 2 weeks ago. Elena's voice was barely audible. The night I ran away was supposed to be my wedding night. They were going to drug me to make me compliant, then hand me over like a piece of property. Jake felt sick. So you escaped. I heard them talking about what would happen to me, how I needed to be broken in properly, how I'd learn to be grateful eventually. Elena shuddered. I waited until everyone was asleep, then I ran. I took one of their cars and drove until it ran out of gas. Then I walked until the storm caught me. Elena, these people, how dangerous are they? Very. The Kozlovs run half the illegal business on the East Coast. And the family that raised me, they don't like losing their investments. Elena grabbed Jake's arm. If they find me, they'll take me back. And they'll punish me for running. Jake stood up and started pacing. His military instincts were kicking in and he didn't like what he was thinking. How would they track you? I don't know. Maybe credit cards, security cameras, license plate readers. Elena looked hopeless. They have connections everywhere. Police, government officials, business leaders. Money buys a lot of loyalty. What about the car you stole? I left it about 10 miles from here when it ran out of gas. If they found it, Jake was already moving toward his laptop. We need to assume they did. He started pulling up maps and satellite images of his property. If they're looking for you, they'll search in expanding circles from where they found the car. Elena watched him work, fear growing in her eyes. Jake, I should leave. I never should have stayed this long. I'm putting you in danger. You're not going anywhere, Jake said firmly. But we need to be smart about this. You don't understand. These aren't ordinary criminals. They have resources, manpower, weapons, and they've invested too much in me to just let me go. Jake turned to face her. Elena, there's something I haven't told you about my past. What? I wasn't just in the military. I was Special Forces. 12 years of dealing with exactly these kinds of people. Jake's expression hardened. I know how they think, how they operate, and I know how to stop them. Elena stared at him. You fought people like this before? Worse than these people. International terrorists, drug cartels, arms dealers. The kind of people who think money and fear make them untouchable. Jake sat back down next to her. The reason I came out here wasn't just because I wanted to be alone. It was because I needed to get away from that world before it destroyed me. What if they find us? Then they'll discover I haven't forgotten how to fight. The next morning, Jake's worst fears were confirmed. He was checking the cattle in the far pasture when he saw them. Black SUVs moving slowly along the main road, stopping occasionally. They were still about 5 miles away, but they were definitely searching. Jake drove back to the house as fast as his truck would go. Elena, he called as he burst through the door. We need to move now. Elena appeared from the kitchen already pale. She'd seen the vehicles too. How many? 3 cars that I could see. Probably more coming. Jake was already grabbing supplies from his emergency kit. We're going to the cabin. What cabin? I have a hunting cabin about 10 miles into the mountains. It's off the grid. No power lines, no phone service, no roads that show up on any maps. Jake stuffed ammunition and food into a backpack. If we can get there without being seen, we can wait them out. What if they don't leave? Then we make them leave. Elena helped him pack, moving with surprising efficiency. Jake, these people won't just give up. Even if they leave, they'll come back with more men, better equipment. I know, but right now we need time to think. Jake shouldered his rifle, and distance from them. As they loaded Jake's truck, Elena grabbed his arm. I need you to understand something. If they catch us, they won't just take me. They'll kill you. These people don't leave witnesses. Jake looked into her green eyes, seeing the fear but also something else. Determination. Elena, I've spent my whole adult life fighting bullies who think they can take whatever they want. I'm not about to stop now. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. Jake started the truck. The moment I decided to help you, it became my fight. And I don't abandon people I care about. Elena's eyes filled with tears. You care about me? More than I probably should, Jake admitted. Which is why we're going to win this thing. They drove into the mountains using back roads and hunting trails that didn't appear on any GPS system. Behind them, the black SUVs continued their methodical search, getting closer to Jake's ranch with every passing hour. As they reached the hidden cabin, Jake realized this was more than just a game of hide-and-seek. Elena's past had finally caught up with her, and now they were both trapped in a war they never asked for. But Jake had learned something important in all his years of fighting. Sometimes the best defense was a good offense, and he was already starting to plan how to turn Elena's hunters into the hunted. The only question was whether they'd have enough time to prepare before the killing started. The hunting cabin was hidden so deep in the mountains that Jake had to use a compass to find it. Built into a natural cave system, it was invisible from the air and nearly impossible to reach without knowing exactly where to look. How did you find this place? Helena asked as they unloaded their supplies. Built it myself 3 years ago. Took me 6 months to get all the materials up here without anyone noticing. Jake lit a small fire in the stone fireplace. I always knew I might need somewhere to disappear completely. Elena looked around the simple but well-stocked cabin. You really did plan for this. Old habits. In my line of work, you learn to always have an exit strategy. For 2 days they stayed hidden while Jake monitored radio frequencies and watched the valley below through binoculars. The black SUVs had found his ranch and were systematically searching every building, every hiding place. There are more of them now, Jake reported on the second evening. I count at least 12 men, maybe more. They've set up some kind of command post in my barn. Elena was cleaning their few dishes by the small window. They won't leave until they find me, or until they're sure I'm dead. Then we need to convince them you're dead. Elena turned to stare at him. What do you mean? Jake had been thinking about this all day. Your old family, the Kozlovs, they're business people, right? Even if it's illegal business, they still think in terms of profit and loss. Yes, but so they're not going to waste unlimited resources looking for you. There has to be a point where the cost of finding you becomes more than you're worth to them. Elena sat down across from him. You want to make them think I'm not worth finding. I want to make them think you're impossible to find. Or better yet, that you never survived that blizzard. Jake pulled out a detailed map of the area. Look, they found the car you abandoned, right? But there's 20 miles of wilderness between there and my ranch. Wild country full of bears and wolves and cliffs you can fall off. So we give them a body. Elena went pale. What? Not a real body? But evidence that you died out there in the storm. Torn clothes, maybe some blood, signs of a bear attack. Something convincing enough that they stop looking. Elena considered this. It might work, but it would have to be perfect. These people aren't stupid. Then we make it perfect. On the third day, Jake's radio crackled with a transmission that made his blood run cold. Unit 3 to base. We've got local law enforcement here wanting to help with the search. Copy that. Unit 3. Sheriff Thompson is on our payroll. Use him however you need. Jake cursed under his breath. They've got the sheriff working for them. Elena wasn't surprised. I told you they have people everywhere. Local police, state officials, federal agents. The Kozlovs have been buying influence for decades. Then we can't trust anyone in law enforcement. That's right. We're completely on our own. That night, as they huddled around the small fire, Elena told Jake more about her life before she escaped. They called it the family business, she said. But it wasn't really a family. It was an organization that specialized in providing special services to very wealthy, very powerful men. What kind of services? Whatever they wanted. Drugs, weapons, people. Elena stared into the flames. Girls like me were raised from childhood to be perfect companions. We were taught languages, music, art, cooking, how to be beautiful and charming and completely obedient. Jake felt sick. How many girls were there? In my group? 8 of us. But there were always new ones coming in and older ones who... Elena's voice trailed off. Who what? Who disappeared when they stopped being useful? Elena wrapped her arms around herself. They told us the girls were getting married, starting new lives. But I started to realize that wasn't true. What happened to them? I think they were killed. Once they'd served their purpose, once they knew too much or became too much trouble, they were eliminated. Jake moved closer to her on the small couch. Elena, you got out. You're safe now, am I? Because from what I've learned about the organization, they don't just lose valuable assets. They recover them or they destroy them to prevent other people from having them. What do you mean? Elena met his eyes. I mean, if they can't take me back, they'll kill me rather than let me live free. And they'll kill anyone who helped me. Jake was quiet for a moment. Well, then we better make sure they don't find us. Jake, you don't understand how ruthless these people are. Viktor Kozlov once had a man's entire family murdered because the man owed him money and couldn't pay. I understand, ruthless, Jake said grimly. I've seen what evil people do when they think they have power. But I've also seen what happens when someone finally stands up to them. What happens? They lose. Because deep down they're cowards. They're used to people being afraid of them, used to getting their way through fear and money. When someone fights back, really fights back, they don't know how to handle it. Elena leaned against Jake's shoulder. I've never had anyone willing to fight for me before. You've never been free to choose who you wanted in your life before. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind in the trees and the crackling of the fire. Finally, Elena spoke again. If we survive this, what happens then? I can't exactly go back to normal life. I don't have identification, education records, a legal existence of any kind. We'll figure it out. There are ways to start over, to build a new identity. Jake smiled slightly. I know some people who specialize in helping people disappear from bad situations. You'd help me do that? Elena, I'd help you do whatever you wanted to do. If you wanted to disappear completely, I'd help you. If you wanted to stay here with me, I'd protect you. If you wanted to go somewhere else and start fresh, I'd make sure you had everything you needed. Elena turned to look at him. What would you want me to do? That's not my choice to make. For the first time in your life, you get to decide what you want, not what other people want for you. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I think I want to stay with you. Not because I'm scared to be alone, not because I owe you anything, but because I care about you too. Jake felt something warm spread through his chest. Are you sure? I'm sure. But first we have to survive the next few days. As if summoned by her words, Jake's radio crackled again. This time the transmission made them both freeze. Base to all units. We've got fresh tracks leading into the mountain area. 2 people heading northeast. Prepare for a full-scale search starting at dawn. Elena and Jake looked at each other in the firelight. Their hiding place had been discovered. The hunt was about to begin. Jake and Elena spent the night preparing for what might be their final battle. Jake cleaned his weapons while Elena studied the maps, memorizing every trail, every hiding spot, every escape route. We have 2 choices, Jake said as dawn approached. We can run deeper into the mountains and hope they give up, or we can make our stand here. Elena looked up from the map she'd been studying. What do you think our chances are if we run? Honestly? Not great. They have more men, better equipment, and they know we're on foot. Jake set down his rifle. Plus, winter's coming. We can't survive in the mountains forever. And if we fight, better odds but higher stakes. If we win, this ends here. If we lose... Jake didn't finish the sentence. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised him. I don't want to run anymore. Elena, no, listen to me. She stood up and faced him. I've been running my whole life. Running from training sessions, running from punishments, running from the truth about what they plan to do with me. 3 weeks ago, I ran from my wedding night, and I've been running ever since. Jake could see the determination building in her eyes. If I keep running, I'll never be free. There will always be another Viktor Kozlov, another organization, another person who thinks they own me. Elena's voice grew stronger. But if we fight back, if we show them that I'm not just some helpless victim they can reclaim whenever they want, maybe then I can finally be free. Jake smiled grimly. You sure about this? Because once we start fighting, there's no going back. I'm sure. Elena pulled on Jake's spare tactical vest. Besides, you taught me something important these past few weeks. What's that? I'm worth fighting for. By mid-morning, they could hear the search teams moving through the forest below their position. Jake counted at least 15 men, all heavily armed and moving in coordinated patterns. They're good, Jake observed through his binoculars. Professional military training. The Kozlovs only hire the best, Elena replied. She was loading ammunition clips with steady hands. No expense spared when it comes to protecting their investments. Jake studied the approaching teams. They're funneling us toward the cliff face. Classic pincer movement. They want to trap us against the rocks with nowhere to run. So what do? We give them what they expect, then hit them from where they don't expect it. Jake pointed to a narrow ledge that ran along the cliff face. That ledge leads to a cave system that connects to 3 different exits. If we can make them think we're trapped, then disappear. They'll be confused and off balance, Elena finished. And confused enemies make mistakes. Exactly. They spent the next hour setting up their trap. Jake rigged explosive devices at key points around the cabin, while Elena prepared a distraction that would draw the searchers' attention. When everything was ready, they climbed to their hidden position on the ledge and waited. The first team reached the cabin just after noon. Jake watched through his scope as 6 men in military gear surrounded the building. Their leader was a tall man with a scar across his left cheek. "That's Anton Volkov," Elena whispered. "He's Viktor Kozlov's chief enforcer. The fact that he's here personally means they really want me back. Well, he's about to be disappointed." Jake's radio, tuned to their frequency, crackled with communication. "Viper 1 to base, we've located the target location. Cabin appears occupied. Moving to secure. Copy, Viper 1. Remember, the girl is to be taken alive. Eliminate any resistance." Elena and Jake exchanged a look. They'd heard everything they needed to know. Jake detonated the first explosive just as the team was entering the cabin. The blast sent 2 men flying and gave Elena the opening she needed to fire on the others from their concealed position. "Contact! Contact!" Anton shouted into his radio. "We're taking fire from the cliff face!" More teams converged on their position, but Jake and Elena were already moving through the cave system. They emerged from a hidden exit 50 yards behind the enemy's position. "Now it's our turn to hunt," Jake said grimly. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse through the mountain terrain. Jake used every trick he'd learned in 12 years of Special Forces operations, while Elena proved to be a quick study in guerrilla warfare. They picked off stragglers, set booby traps, and used the terrain to their advantage. But they were still outnumbered, and Anton's men were professionals who adapted quickly to the changing situation. "Base to all teams," came the radio transmission. "The girl has military training or someone helping her. Adjust tactics accordingly. And remember, Mr. Kozlov wants his property back intact." "Property," Elena spat as they took cover behind a fallen tree. "I'll show them what their property can do." The tide of the battle turned when Elena suggested something that shocked Jake. "I want to surrender," she said. "What?" "Elena, no. We can win this, not surrender for real. But if I let them think they've captured me, I can get close to Anton. Close enough to—" She mimed, drawing a knife across her throat. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. Jake, they want me alive. That gives me an advantage they don't expect." Elena's eyes were fierce. "They think I'm a helpless victim. They have no idea what you've taught me about fighting back." Jake stared at her. In 3 weeks, Elena had transformed from a terrified refugee into a warrior, willing to risk everything for her freedom. "What do you need me to do?" he asked finally. Elena smiled. "Just be ready to catch me when I jump." 20 minutes later, Elena walked out of the forest with her hands raised, apparently surrendering to Anton's team. Jake watched from his concealed position as they zip-tied her hands and started marching her toward their extraction point. What they didn't know was that Elena had palmed one of Jake's combat knives, and she was carrying enough explosives to take out half their team. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd been found in the snow. She was a woman who'd chosen to fight for her freedom no matter the cost. And Anton Volkov was about to discover just how dangerous an angry woman could be. Elena walked calmly between her captors, her hands zip-tied behind her back, looking every inch the defeated prisoner. But inside, she was counting steps, memorizing positions, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Anton Volkov walked beside her, speaking into his radio. "Base, this is Viper 1, package secured. Preparing for extraction. Copy, Viper 1. Mr. Kozlov is very pleased. He's flying in personally to collect his investment." Elena's blood ran cold. Viktor Kozlov himself was coming. That meant this wasn't just about recovering stolen property. This was personal. They reached a clearing where 2 helicopters waited. Elena could see more armed men surrounding the area, and in the center, a luxury helicopter with the Kozlov family crest painted on the side. As they approached, The luxury helicopter's door opened and Viktor Kozlov stepped out. Elena had only seen him once before, during the arrangement ceremony where she was promised to his son. He was a tall, imposing man in his 50s, with steel gray hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to look right through people. "My dear Elena," Viktor said in accented English as she was brought before him, "you've led us on quite an adventure." Elena kept her eyes down, playing the part of a broken, submissive girl. "I'm sorry, Mr. Kozlov, I was confused, scared. I didn't know what I was doing." Viktor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Of course you were scared. Running away like that during a blizzard, with no plan, no resources. It was the desperate act of a frightened child." "Yes, sir. But you're not a child anymore, are you, Elena? You're a woman now, and women have responsibilities." Viktor walked in a slow circle around her. "My son has been very patient waiting for his bride. But his patience has limits." Elena forced herself to remain calm even as Viktor's words made her skin crawl. "I understand, sir. Do you? Because I'm not entirely convinced you do." Viktor stopped in front of her. "You see, Elena, you're not just a bride. You're a symbol. A symbol of the alliance between our organizations, of the trust and respect that exists between our families." Elena finally looked up at him. "And what happens if that symbol is damaged?" Viktor's eyes narrowed. "Then the symbol needs to get restored." That's when Elena noticed something that made her heart race. Jake was nowhere to be seen among the captured or dead, which meant he was still out there, still fighting. "Tell me, Elena," Viktor continued, "did you really think you could just run away and start a new life? Did you think we would simply forget about our investment?" "No, sir," Elena said quietly. "I knew you would come for me." "Good. Then you understand that this little rebellion is over. You'll return with me, marry my son as planned, and we'll pretend this unfortunate incident never happened." Elena looked around at the armed men, the helicopters, the display of power and wealth. 3 weeks ago this would have terrified her into submission, but now all she felt was anger. "Mr. Kozlov," she said, her voice still soft but with an edge that made several men reach for their weapons, "I have something to tell you." "Oh? And what's that?" Elena smiled, and for the first time Viktor looked uncertain. "I'm not your property anymore." Before anyone could react, Elena twisted her wrists, freeing herself from the zip ties she'd been working loose during the entire walk. In one fluid motion, she drew the knife Jake had given her and pressed it to Viktor's throat. "Nobody move," she said, her voice now strong and clear, "or your boss dies." The clearing erupted in shouts and the sound of weapons being raised, but Elena pressed the knife closer to Viktor's skin, drawing a thin line of blood. "I said, don't move," she shouted. Viktor's eyes were wide with shock. "You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking control of my own life." Elena's hand was steady as she held the knife. "For 22 years I've been told what to do, where to go, who to be. But that ends now. You can't possibly think you'll get away with this, maybe not. But you know what? I'd rather die free than live as your son's slave." That's when the real chaos began. Jake's voice echoed across the clearing from hidden speakers he'd positioned during their weeks of preparation. "Elena's right, Kozlov. She's not your property, and you're about to learn what happens when you threaten someone I care about." The first explosion took out the communications equipment. The second destroyed one of the helicopters. The third sent Viktor's men scrambling for cover as Jake's precise sniper fire picked off their leaders one by one. In the confusion, Elena dragged Viktor toward the tree line, using him as a human shield. But the crime boss was stronger than he looked, and he managed to break free just as they reached the forest edge. "You think this changes anything?" Viktor snarled, pulling out his own weapon. "I own judges, senators, police chiefs. Even if you kill me, my organization will hunt you down." "Maybe," Elena said, pulling out a small recording device. "But first they'll have to deal with this." Viktor's face went white as he recognized the device. "Where did you get that?" "I recorded everything during my captivity. Every crime you discussed, every dirty deal, every murder you ordered. Names, dates, bank account numbers." Elena smiled coldly. "Did you really think I was just sitting there quietly all those years, not paying attention?" "That's impossible. You were never allowed near any business discussions. You'd be surprised what a quiet, invisible girl can overhear when no one thinks she matters." Viktor raised his gun, but Elena was faster. The knife Jake had taught her to throw found its mark, and Viktor Kozlov collapsed to the forest floor. As his men continued to fight Jake's guerrilla attack, Elena stood over the man who had controlled her entire life. He was still alive, but barely. The recording is already uploaded to multiple news outlets and federal agencies, Elena told him. Your empire is finished. Victor looked up at her with hatred in his dying eyes. You were supposed to be perfect. I am perfect, Elena said quietly. Perfectly free. When Jake found her 10 minutes later, Elena was sitting calmly against a tree, watching the last of Victor's men surrender or flee. The recording device was in her hand and she was smiling. Is it over? Jake asked. Elena looked up at him and Jake saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Peace. Yes, she said. It's finally over. In the distance, they could hear sirens approaching. Real law enforcement this time. Responding to the evidence Elena had provided about the corruption in the local sheriff's department. Elena had faced her demons and won. But more importantly, she had chosen to win. Not just for survival, but for the right to decide her own future. The girl who had been found dying in the snow was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who had fought for her freedom and claimed it with her own hands. 6 months later, Elena stood in the kitchen of Jake's ranch house humming softly as she made breakfast. But everything was different now. The humming wasn't nervous or fearful, it was happy. And the breakfast wasn't something she made because she felt obligated to earn her keep. It was something she made because she wanted to take care of someone she loved. Through the window, she could see Jake working with the new horses they'd bought last month. He'd been teaching her to ride, and she was getting good at it. More importantly, she was enjoying it. The federal investigation into the Kozlov organization had taken down over 200 people, including politicians, judges, and law enforcement officials in 12 states. Elena's recordings had provided the evidence needed to dismantle one of the largest criminal enterprises on the East Coast. In return, the FBI had given Elena a new identity, complete with legal documents, a social security number, and a clean background. She was no longer a ghost. She was a real person with real rights. But the most important change was inside Elena herself. She had chosen the name Elena Morrison when the FBI offered her any identity she wanted. Not because she felt obligated to take Jake's name, but because she wanted to. Because for the first time in her life, she was choosing her own family. Morning, beautiful, Jake said as he came in from the barn. He kissed her cheek and poured himself coffee. Morning.
How are the new horses settling in?
Really well. Thunder's still a little skittish, but he's coming around. Jake sat down at the table. You know, I was thinking about what you said yesterday. Elena turned from the stove. About what? About wanting to help other women in situations like yours. Elena had been thinking about this a lot lately. The FBI had told her that her case had led to the rescue of 12 other women from similar situations. But Elena knew there were many more out there who needed help. I want to start a foundation, Elena said, sitting down across from Jake. Something that helps women escape trafficking situations and start new lives. That's a big undertaking. I know, but I have something most people don't. I understand what these women are going through. I know what it feels like to be told you're worthless except for what men want from you. And I know what it feels like to discover that's not true. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. What would you need to make this happen? Money, legal help, security for the women we help. And probably a bigger place than this ranch. Jake was quiet for a moment. You know, my military pension and the insurance money from my old house would be enough to get started. And I know some people who could help with the security side. Elena stared at him. Jake, that's your retirement money. Your security. Elena, look at me. Jake squeezed her hand. 6 months ago, I was living alone in the middle of nowhere, convinced that the best thing I could do for the world was stay away from it. You changed that. You showed me that some things are worth fighting for. But, besides, Jake grinned, I can't think of a better way to spend my retirement than helping you save other women. Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Are you sure? I'm sure. But I have one condition. What? We do this together. As partners. As equals. Jake's expression grew serious. I don't want to be the man telling you what to do with your foundation. I want to be the man supporting what you want to do. Elena laughed through her tears. You know, 6 months ago I didn't even know what it meant to be an equal partner with someone. And now, Now I know it means we make decisions together. We support each other's dreams and we trust each other to be honest about what we want." Elena paused. "And I know it means I get to choose to be with you every day, not because I have to, but because I want to." Jake stood up and pulled Elena into his arms. "So what do you want to do today?" Elena thought about it. 6 months ago, if someone had asked her that question, she wouldn't have understood it. The idea that she could want things, could choose things, could decide how to spend her time based on her own desires, it had been completely foreign to her. "I want to ride thunder," she said finally. "I want to work on the foundation plans. I want to cook dinner for us tonight. And I want to fall asleep next to you knowing that tomorrow I'll wake up free to make more choices." That sounds perfect. As they walked outside together, Elena reflected on how much her life had changed. She'd gone from being a prisoner to being a survivor to being a woman who had fought for her freedom and won it. But more than that, she'd learned what it meant to be truly valued by another person. Not for what she could do for them, not for what she represented, but for who she was as a human being. Jake had taught her that love wasn't about ownership or control. It was about choice. The choice to be with someone because they made you better, because they supported your dreams, because they saw you as an equal partner in building a life together. And Elena had chosen Jake not because she was grateful to him, not because she was afraid to be alone, but because he was a good man who treated her with respect and kindness, because he made her laugh, because he challenged her to be stronger and braver than she thought she could be. As they worked with the horses that morning, Elena thought about the foundation they would build together. They would call it Second Chances, and it would help women escape trafficking situations and build new lives of their own choosing. Some of the women would choose to disappear completely, starting fresh in new places with new identities. Others would choose to fight back against their captors, working with law enforcement to bring down the organizations that had hurt them. And some would choose to help other women the way Elena wanted to help them. All of them would learn the same lesson Elena had learned, that they were valuable human beings deserving of respect, kindness, and the right to make their own choices about their lives. That evening, as Elena and Jake sat on their porch watching the sunset over the mountains, Elena realized something important. "Jake," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "Yeah? That first night when you found me in the snow, you saved my life. You saved your own life. I just gave you a warm place to heal." Elena smiled. "No, you did more than that. You showed me that I was worth saving, and then you taught me how to save myself." Jake wrapped his arm around her. "You know what you taught me?" "What?" "That some things are worth fighting for. That love isn't about being needed. It's about choosing to build something beautiful with another person." Jake kissed the top of her head. "And that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone isn't to solve their problems for them, but to stand beside them while they solve their own problems." As the stars came out over the Montana sky, Elena Morrison sat beside the man she had chosen to love, in the home she had chosen to make, thinking about the future she was choosing to build. She was no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled out of a blizzard. She was a woman who had fought for her freedom and won it, a woman who was using that freedom to help others find their own, and for the first time in her life, Elena was exactly where she wanted to be, with exactly who she wanted to be with, doing exactly what she chose to do. She was free, and she was home.